Have you ever heard of a circus that doesn't appear on any map? A circus that, when it arrives, leaves a trail of madness, despair, and unexplained disappearances? Welcome to the story of the abandoned Circus of New Orleans. But if you're curious enough to find out what happens, know that there's no turning back. The show is about to begin, and it never ends. Imagine a place where reality and nightmare blur. New Orleans, a city filled with mysteries and dark stories, hides a secret that few survive to tell. In the heart of its empty streets, there is a circus. An abandoned circus, but with a unique invitation. An invitation that no one can resist. When the curtains open, what you see is not just a performance, it's your own sanity unraveling. Prepare to embark on the most disturbing story of all. The abandoned Circus of New Orleans is much more than just a show. It's a curse, and now it's time to watch until the end, or be consumed by your own fear. Before we dive into this mystery, I want to know, have you ever heard of the abandoned Circus of New Orleans? Leave a comment below sharing your theories or experiences. And if you're curious to find out what happens next, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to not miss any detail of this chilling story. The sky over New Orleans was heavy, tinged with dark gray like an unfinished painting. Jonathan Cain, an investigative journalist and veteran of stories that should never be told, sat in his rented car, staring at the vast, empty lot ahead. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, the old newspaper on his lap, trembling with the wind that whistled through the window cracks. The headline of the yellowed article was as intriguing as it was disturbing: "The Massacre of Cirque Soleil Noir, Tragedy or Curse." Below, a black and white photo showed the circus in its glory days. A colossal tent striped in black and gold, surrounded by smiling performers and awestruck children. But the words that followed told a different story: a devastating fire, bodies never found, and a legend that had hung over the place for decades. Jonathan didn't believe in curses. At least that's what he told himself whenever he started a new investigation. He lived to expose the horrors hidden beneath the facade of supernatural mysteries, usually human crimes disguised as urban legends. But something about this circus, lost and forgotten on the edge of the swamp, seemed different. It wasn't just the story that drew him in, but an inexplicable, almost compulsive fascination. When he stepped out of the car, the humid, dense air of New Orleans hit him like a punch. The sound of cicadas was deafening, but even so, Jonathan felt something more. An underlying silence, an unnatural pause between the hums, as if the swamp itself was holding its breath. He walked towards the ruins of the circus. The main canvas, or what remained of it, was torn and hung like dead skin on corroded bones. The smell was a mix of mold and something more acrid, like rust mixed with old meat. Jonathan turned on his flashlight, but the light seemed to be swallowed by the darkness that inhabited the interior of the tent. He took a deep breath and took the first step inside. The walls seemed to pulse with ancient memories. The wooden floor creaked under his feet, and somewhere in the distance, he heard something that sounded like a muffled laugh. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Jonathan's heart race. "Probably the wind," he murmured to himself, his voice echoing in the void. But even he didn't entirely believe it. In the center of the tent, he found a music box. Decorated with golden arabesques and studded with colored stones, it seemed surprisingly intact. Against his better judgment, he turned the small crank. The melody that came out was distorted, with off-key notes that seemed to whisper unintelligible words. As the music played, he felt the temperature drop, and the smell of burning invaded his nostrils. Suddenly, something flashed quickly in his peripheral vision. He turned, pointing the flashlight into the emptiness, but there was nothing there. Or rather, almost nothing. On the ground, there were footprints, small and barefoot, that weren't there before. Jonathan felt panic creep up his spine, but he wasn't the type to run easily. Instead, he grabbed his camera, determined to record everything. But when he looked through the viewfinder, things started to change. The lens showed something his eyes couldn't see, hooded figures motionless surrounding him at a distance. He lowered the camera, and the space was empty again. Was it real, or was his mind starting to play tricks on him? Jonathan was about to discover that sometimes the line between reality and imagination wasn't so clear. Jonathan's camera started to malfunction. The figures captured by his lens seemed to get closer with each click. But when he lowered the device, the emptiness remained. His breathing grew heavy, his fingers trembling as he tried to review the photos. Nothing, just indistinct blurs, like shadows mixed with smoke. He heard the laughter again, now clearer, coming from somewhere outside the tent. Jonathan followed the sound with hesitant steps, fighting against the primal urge to run. The exterior of the circus seemed even more oppressive. The swamp trees swayed strangely, as if manipulated by an invisible conductor. He couldn't ignore the sound of footsteps echoing behind him, light, almost childlike. Jonathan stopped, turned abruptly, and with the flashlight in hand, illuminated the area. Nothing but twisted shadows. Anyone there? His voice faltered at the end of the sentence, a reflection of the growing fear consuming his insides. He followed the sound to one of the abandoned trailers that belonged to the performers. The wood was rotten, the windows shattered, but the door was still in place, slightly ajar. As he pushed it open, he smelled the sweet, nauseating scent of something old and decayed. Inside, the space was decorated with tattered clothes, cracked clown masks, and porcelain dolls with eyes that seemed to follow him. In the center of the room, a rocking chair swayed gently back and forth, but the air was still. A child's voice whispered in his ear, too close to be ignored. "Did you come to play with us?" Jonathan jumped, turning so fast he almost lost his balance. There was no one there, but the rocking chair stopped moving. He noticed that the floor around the chair was marked with symbols carved into the wood, intricate patterns that resembled eyes. Many eyes. They seemed to stare directly at him, although they were just cuts in the wood. At least that's what he tried to believe. Suddenly, Jonathan heard the sound of something scratching the outside of the trailer, like nails scraping against the wood. He rushed to the door but hesitated as he turned the handle. What was outside could be worse than what was inside. When he finally opened the door, the night seemed darker than before, as if the world had been swallowed by an immense shadow. The music of the circus played in the distance, although Jonathan knew that no instrument had been played there in decades. The childlike footsteps surrounded him again, and this time he saw them. Small, bare feet, dirty with mud, leaving trails as they moved on their own across the soaked ground. Jonathan backed away, terror pulsing through his veins. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from behind him, raspy and authoritative. Jonathan turned, but there was no one there. Just an elongated shadow on the wall of the trailer, a thin, hunched figure with a top hat and a grotesque smile. The shadow moved, but there was no body to cast it. He ran, ignoring the path, the swamp branches cutting his skin as he tried to escape. But the more he ran, the more lost he felt, until he tripped over something solid and fell to his knees on the ground. It was the music box again, placed in front of him, as if it had been put there on purpose. Jonathan started to laugh, not because he found anything funny, but because the terror had crossed the line of bearable. As he laughed, the music started to play on its own, and in the background, he heard the child's whisper again, "Now you are one of us." Jonathan was kneeling on the muddy ground, the small music box spinning on its own in front of him. The sound was sweet, but there was something deeply wrong with its melody. Dissonant notes emerged, breaking the harmony and leaving a trail of discomfort in his mind. He tried to push the box away, kicking it hard. It stopped playing, but the melody continued in his head, as if it had settled in some dark corner of his mind. "You can't escape the show," a raspy voice murmured close to him. Jonathan quickly stood up, his eyes searching for the source of the sound. That's when he saw something that froze his blood. The clown, or at least what seemed to be one. The creature was at a distance, its figure shrouded in shadows, but it was impossible to ignore the wide artificial smile that gleamed in the dark, like teeth painted with phosphorescence. It was thin, its limbs unnaturally elongated. It wore a tattered circus suit, stained with something too dark to be just dirt. The clown didn't move. It just stood there, staring at Jonathan. Instinctive terror took over, but Jonathan felt something even more disturbing, the desire to approach. It was as if something in the clown's presence called to him, a force that fought against his logic and survival instinct. "Come, the show is about to begin." The voice came from all sides, echoing in the silent swamp. Jonathan started walking, unable to control his own movements. With each step, the distant laughter of children echoed around. And before he knew it, he was back in the big tent. But now it was lit by swinging lanterns, their flames emitting a ghostly red light. He entered, unable to resist the force pulling him. Inside the tent, the show was set up. Old, broken bleachers were filled with human figures, or almost human. Their skin was grey, their faces frozen in macabre smiles, their dead eyes reflecting the lantern light. In the center of the ring, a figure taller than all the others awaited. It was the ringmaster, the same one from the shadow Jonathan had seen earlier. He removed his top hat, revealing a deformed skull with cracks that pulsed like living veins. "Ladies and gentlemen," the ringmaster's voice echoed, deep and resonant, "give a warm welcome to our newest member, Jonathan." Jonathan tried to scream, but no sound came out of his mouth. He felt something grab his legs, small, icy hands climbing up his body. He looked down and saw the circus children, or what remained of them. Their eyes were empty, but their smiles were of pure, malicious delight. He was dragged into the ring, unable to fight. The audience began to clap in unison, the sound echoing like thunder in the enclosed space. The ringmaster approached, holding a grotesque clown mask. "Every artist needs a mask," he said, bringing it close to Jonathan's face. Jonathan tried to resist, but the mask seemed alive, pulsing as if made of flesh. When it was placed on his face, he felt a sharp pain, as if 1,000 needles were piercing his skin. And then he saw, not just the circus, but what lay beyond it, an infinite void, filled with eyes watching him. The circus was just a door to something greater, something that couldn't be comprehended by the human mind. Jonathan screamed, but his voice was lost in the laughter of the audience. He was now part of the show. Jonathan woke up suddenly, gasping as if he had emerged from a nightmare. He was lying in his bed, the familiar peeling ceiling of his apartment staring back at him. For a moment, he believed it had all been a dream. The circus, the children, the clown. But something was wrong. His hand trembled as he touched his face, and he realized he was sweating cold. But as he felt his skin, he froze. There was something there, something that wasn't his skin. He rushed to the bathroom mirror, but hesitated. Before turning on the light, when he finally did, he saw his reflection, but it wasn't him. The clown mask was fused to his face. There were no visible seams, no signs of adhesion. It was as if it had become part of his flesh. His eyes were the same, but they were sunken in deeper sockets, exuding a restless shadow. Jonathan tried to pull it off, but the pain was unbearable. It felt like he was tearing off his own skin. He screamed, but the sound that came out wasn't human. It was laughter, loud, shrill, and completely beyond his control. Memories of the previous night flooded back like an avalanche. He was in the ring. He was part of the show, and then nothing, just the void. His cell phone vibrated on the bathroom counter, interrupting his thoughts. He looked at the screen, a notification for a live video. Live broadcast, The Abandoned. Circus, exclusive performance. Jonathan clicked on the link, unable to resist. The video showed the circus tent, but now it was filled with spectators, real people, not the ghostly figures from before. They laughed, applauded, as if they were watching an ordinary show. The camera angle changed, focusing on the ring. In the center was Jonathan, but not as he was now, but as the clown. The mask fit perfectly, his figure moved with the grace of an experienced artist. He told jokes he didn't hear, performed tricks he didn't remember learning. The live broadcast had thousands of viewers. Comments popped up on the screen. "This circus is amazing, where is it? His performance is perfect, it looks so real. When is the next show?" Jonathan tried to scream, but again, only laughter came out. He turned off the phone, but the laughter continued echoing, coming from inside his own head. In the following days, Jonathan tried everything to remove the mask. Doctors, surgeons, no one could explain what it was. Some said they saw nothing wrong with his face, that he looked perfectly normal. Others refused to treat him, claiming his presence was disturbing. But the worst was at night. He always woke up in the circus tent. Each time the audience was larger. Each time his role in the show was more elaborate. When he returned to the real world, he was exhausted, as if he had actually performed for hours. Gradually, Jonathan realized the truth. He was trapped between two worlds. By day, he was a broken man, haunted by a mask that no one else could see. By night, he was the star of a circus that transcended reality, a show that fed something beyond human comprehension, and the audience kept growing. One day, Jonathan received an envelope. Inside was a single note, handwritten, "Every show needs a bigger stage. Prepare for your global debut." The message was signed with a symbol, the clown's wide smile. Jonathan knew he couldn't escape. The circus wasn't just a place, it was an entity. He wasn't just the artist, he was the show. The world moved on, as it always does, but Jonathan's name began to gain notoriety in the darker circles of the internet. Videos of the abandoned circus of New Orleans started appearing on obscure forums, always with a growing audience. Some swore they had been there, describing the shows as hypnotic and terrifying, but they could never pinpoint the exact location. Other accounts began to surface, people claiming to hear laughter in the darkest corners of their homes, children talking about the clown in the mirror, describing him with details that only those who had seen the show could know. A daring influencer decided to investigate further. He went live directly from New Orleans, walking the deserted streets, in search of the infamous circus. The broadcast was abruptly interrupted, and he was never seen again. Days later, his account was hacked, and a single post was published. The show must go on. However, the story doesn't end there. The circus seems to be expanding, appearing in different parts of the world, always attracting those who cannot resist the call. The performances are described as hypnotic, but no one who attends can remember exactly how they got there or how they left. Jonathan is still there, at the center of it all. His face now completely unrecognizable, fused with the macabre smile. That is the symbol of the circus. But his eyes, they still hold remnants of humanity, as if silently screaming for help. You, reader or viewer, might be thinking, this is just a story. But look around. Have you heard any laughter at an inopportune moment? Have you felt the presence of something when you were alone? The circus is not just a place, it's an idea, a parasite that feeds on curiosity, despair, and darkness. And who Knows, maybe you'll be the next to receive an invitation to the show. The show must go on. So, can you hear the clown's laughter? What do you think happened to Jonathan? Could you be the next one invited to the show? Share your theories and fears in the comments. We're curious to know what you think about this nightmare. And if you want to know more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to not miss the next chapter of terror. Who knows what the circus has in store for us? Until next time, if you're brave enough to come back,